possibility of working is affected by various factors and on different levels. The possibility of working does not solely depend on the individual, but also on managers in organizations and enterprises that shape and create the conditions for employees in the workplace and the working environment through decisions and measures. These measures may, for example, be about leadership, formal and informal leaders, working hours, access to competence development, climate, organizational culture, and attitudes toward ages. But the framework for the individual's possibility of working is created on the societal level through society's decisions on laws, regulations, pension, and social security conditions. The laws and regulations of society also rules the organizations and managers' possibility of offering measures for their employees. This theoretical model, the Swage model, that will be described in this lecture, visualizes the complexity regarding work conditions and is thought to work as a tool in the quest of creating healthy and sustainable workplaces. The aim of the Swage model is to increase knowledge and understanding by visualizing measures and individuals' needs that can be used to create a sustainable working life for all ages on different levels in society. The model is supposed to be a tool to meet new and changed demand put on individuals, on organizations and enterprises, and on our society, when many elderly employees stay in working life until an older age. The demographic change with a larger proportion of elderly citizens in society is present around the world. This graphic depicts the increasing old age dependency ratio in the world. The numbers show that the decreasing ratio in different countries between the number of people participating in working life and the number of pensioners in the population. In other words, how many people in working life are estimated to support every pensioner in the population through the country's social security systems. A challenge with a larger proportion of elderly citizens in society is that it puts a larger strain on the pension system. In 1950 in Sweden, 5 participants of the workforce provided for every pensioner. In 2050, only 2 participants of the workforce are estimated to provide for every pensioner. That is, if we keep the current pension system. The increasing number of pensioners risk a larger financial strain on the economy and challenge our welfare. Our current pension system is based on citizens working for 2/3 of their lives, so that if we live for longer, we also need to work for longer. Healthcare systems is likely to be put under strain, since elderly citizens generally have a larger need for care. Therefore, many countries talk about increasing the number of worked hours in the economy by postponing the retirement age and motivate more people to work until an older age, in order to cope with a larger proportion of citizens living longer lives. If more people can work for longer, this is an opportunity for a larger number of worked hours that contribute to the societal economy. However, if a larger number of citizens should be able to and want to work for longer, the workplaces and working life need to be made sustainable for employees of all ages. In our working environment and working life, there are several factors that affect and influence whether we can and want to participate in working life. These factors can be divided into 9 areas. However, these areas are somewhat interconnected. The individual's health, of course, plays a large role in whether an individual can and wants to participate in working life. Both individuals' self-rated health, in other words, their own experience of well-being, as well as diagnosis, functional variations and injuries that the individual may have, are significant to whether the individual can and wants to participate in working life. The physical work environment that the individual is situated in, tear, workload, accidents, and risks that the individual is exposed to through their physical work environment is of importance to whether an individual wants to and is able to participate in working life. The mental work environment, in other words, the stress, demand, and control and threats that the individual is subjected to in their mental work environment, affects whether an individual is able to and wants to participate in working life. Working hours, work pace, and time for recuperation. What work hours we have, if it's full or part-time, night shifts or day shifts, as well as work pace, whether it is too high or too low, as well as time for recuperation between and during work shifts, so that we have sufficient breaks during a day at work, all affects whether an individual can and wants to participate in working life. Finances are important to whether we can and want to participate in working life. We want to be rewarded for our efforts and be able to afford our bills, costs for living, food, leisure activities, etc. Therefore, the personal financial situation is important to whether we can and want to participate in working life. Even though the wage model's main focus is on working life and work situation, factors outside work affect whether an individual wants to and is able to participate in working life. Family, partner, friends, leisure activities and socialization is of great importance as a support to being able to and wanting to participate in working life. Factors that may affect participation in working life are, for example, taking care of children or an elderly parent. When the partner plans to retire affects when I want to retire, since many couples plan their retirement together. Furthermore, when friends and social acquaintances plan to retire, what leisure activities the individual has outside work, etc. Attitudes within the organization or enterprise are important to whether an individual can and wants to participate in working life. The social support the individual receives at work from managers and co-workers, whether the individual experiences social inclusion and social support, whether the individual is subjected to disregard and discrimination, for example, ageism, but also all other grounds for discrimination. The manager's support in these topics is of great importance. What also affects whether an individual wants to and is able to participate in working life is the experience of work satisfaction, the experience of stimulation in work, whether work activities and tasks make the employee experience self-fulfillment, that individual experience the core of their work and work tasks as meaningful and important. Furthermore, an individual's competence, skills, knowledge, and development are crucial. Whether an individual receives competence development throughout working life, that they stay employable through development, that everyone, despite of age, has the opportunity to join in new projects and competence development, so that enterprises and organizations do not disregard elderly employees by not permitting them to receive the same opportunities to learn new things and develop their competence, since this can make an employee feel that they do not have the right skills and competence to participate in working life. Analysis showed that age relates to the 9 determinant areas that affect whether we can and want to participate in working life until an older age, and are therefore part of the wage model. Biological age relates to the health effects of the work environment. Since health, diagnosis, functional variations are associated to the physical work environment, the mental work environment, as well as working hours, work pace, and time for recuperation. These factors all affect our biological aging. The chronological age relates and is associated to a personal financial situation through different benefit systems, laws, and regulations regarding age. These are all based on the chronological age. Social age relates to social inclusion and support. since we receive different support and are perceived differently depending on our life phase, both in and outside working life. The cognitive age relates to the execution of work tasks, since our memory changes with age. Competence and skills play a part, as well as the opportunity for self-fulfilling activities. Age must be a part of the reflection on how to make working life sustainable for all ages, since these different determinant areas and different age definitions that relate to them affect us throughout our working life. To work or not to work? That is the question. If we return to the Swage model and the part that regards the individual level, we can see that the four different considerations whether to leave working life or not correlates with the four determinant spheres of the Swage model. The first consideration correlates to the first sphere of the personal health in relation to work environment circumstances, regarding self-rated health, diagnosis, physical work environment, mental work environment, working hours, and time for recuperation. The second consideration correlates with the second sphere of personal finances. The third consideration correlates to the third sphere of social support and inclusion, both in working life with leadership, social support, disregard, and outside working life with partner, family, friends, etc. The fourth consideration, whether to leave working life or not, correlates to the execution of work tasks, which contains work satisfaction, stimulating activities, self-fulfillment, skills, knowledge, competence, and possibility of development, etc. Tools and methods of operation to make the workplace sustainable for all ages. This could, for example, be to use the Swage model and systematic work environment management, together with available research and knowledge, as well as regulations and guidelines from work environment authorities. Interoperability and routines to examine working conditions based on predictors for a sustainable working life for all ages. To determine risks based on the predictors. Develop an action plan, timetable, and share of responsibilities for measures. To adopt measures and to follow up and verify the impact of the measures. It is important that we weigh in the age perspective in the systematic work environment management, because we know that younger and elderly employees run a greater risk of being subjected to occupational injury. Employees aged 55 years and above constitute a large proportion of occupational injuries with deadly outcome, since hearing and eyesight, as well as response capacity and muscle strength, generally deteriorates with age. Therefore, this must be taken into account when determining risks in the workplace.